I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. So today we're going to be talking about something most people find really boring about the prequels, but I find fascinating, so I'm going to discuss it. And that is the politics. Specifically something mentioned briefly but significantly in Attack of the Clones. So one of the key points of Attack of the Clones that kind of seems to fly under the radar in a lot of cases is the Emergency Powers Act. The Emergency Powers Act is the act enabled by the Galactic Senate which allows Palpatine to create an army. Now, generally, before the passing of the Emergency Powers Act, it was considered that the entire Republic Senate would be needed to convene to summon an army. But the Emergency Powers Act not only allowed Palpatine to summon an army entirely on his own, which would end up being the clone army that would fight in the Clone Wars, but it also allowed him to extend his term as Supreme Chancellor. It removed a lot of checks and balances that were intended to keep the Supreme Chancellor from going rogue and kind of taking over the Republic. And in a lot of ways, it's seen as one of the big events that leads to the Galactic Empire. So the Emergency Powers Act was passed in a very tense situation during something called the Separatist Crisis, and I actually did a video on the Separatist Crisis, so I'll put a link up in one of the corners if you want to learn more about what the Separatist Crisis actually was. Cliff notes, though, the Outer Rim was on the verge of revolution, and the Republic had no army. At this point, they had just received intelligence suggesting that the droid army was being built on Geonosis for the Confederacy of Independent Systems. It was very clear that a major war was on the horizon, that the Republic was nowhere near ready to deal with it. But the Chancellor himself couldn't propose the Emergency Powers Act, since it adds so much power to his political position. It would be seen as a sort of overreach or an abuse of power for him to propose it. So he needed to convince a senator to propose it. One of the few senators that was really good at encouraging the Galactic Senate to make major changes like the Emergency Powers Act was Padme Amidala. However, she was away being protected on Naboo at the time due to threats against her life by leaders of the Trade Federation. So with Padme out of the picture, that responsibility ended up falling on the shoulders of the great Jar Jar Binks. He appeared before the Senate to propose the Emergency Powers Act, and it came across as kind of humorous because of the way his character is sort of set up, and honestly, the history that his character has. And the Senate, seeing the imminent Separatist crisis, passed the Emergency Powers Act. With the act passed through the Senate almost unanimously, Palpatine reluctantly accepts the new powers given to him. The office of the Chancellor would retain these political powers until the end of the Clone Wars, with the sort of unwritten assumption being that when the war was over, Palpatine was going to relinquish these powers back to the Senate. However, but what we see in Revenge of the Sith is that when the Jedi go to confront him, it leads to that showdown in the Chancellor's chambers and ends up being immediately before the rise of the Empire. The Emergency Powers Act really allowed Palpatine to grab onto power and hold onto it during those crucial years of the Clone Wars, where he was kind of sinking his teeth into the galaxy and staking his claim on the power that he held as Chancellor and expanding it, which would eventually become the office of the Emperor. So if you enjoyed what you saw here today or just want more sci-fi discussions, head down below, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you can get notified when I upload new videos. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Tell me what you thought of the Emergency Powers Act being in Star Wars. Do you think it's too boring and political? Would you rather they kind of leave the politics on the sidelines? Or does the fall of the Republic fascinate you? Do you want to learn more about what brought down this 1,000-year-old galactic government? So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.